Okay, let's talk about Fremont and what it looks like now. So, right now, Fremont is right here. Fremont look Fremont is this white little area that is surrounded by all this light green. Beside Fremont, you can see the Fremont State Lakes, the Platte River that runs just past the lakes, and the Elkhorn River that runs just past Arlington. You can also see a lot of this green space around Fremont. This is natural wildlife along with agricultural land that is being used. Fremont is a bigger city. It is on the side of a bigger city. It has a population of 27,000, almost 8,000. Let's take a little more deep dive into what Fremont looks like right now, a little closer to home. So, if you look a little closer, you can see the many green patches. These are typically parks and schools. Over here, this is kind of the outside of Fremont, where you see a lot of that green happening again, along with the Fremont Golf Course. So they have a bit of a darker green, just because that's kind of how their grass is. Again, this is more of the outskirts of Fremont, so you're seeing a lot of that green where it's just land that's not being used for any agriculture. You can also see some major highways and interstates right here. This is going down from like the Walmart area. And you can also see the Fremont Splash Station. So right here we have the John C. Fremont Park. Or not the John C. Fremont Park, I apologize. This is the John C. Fremont Lake and the splash station right next to it. This is one of the few bodies of water that we do have in Fremont. And here is the power plant. And so you may notice a small body of water next to the power plant. That is where they have their resource of water. And most of these other green spots in the Fremont area is small parks or school areas. There is not much green space available. Most of Fremont is urbanized with not a wide range. Just outside of Fremont, if we are wanting, or next to the Fremont Lakes, if we are wanting to, we do have camps that are protecting the area of forests around us, but that is pretty much all we have as far as that. Now, if we look at the terrain view, we can get a kind of a better idea of what Fremont is currently looking like. So, if we zoom out, we can see that again, Fremont is this pretty wide white area compared to the very much grass color around us. So a lot of this again is agricultural land with some protected areas around here like the lakes, like by the lakes and the river. And that's mostly our protected land here in Fremont. And it's not even in Fremont, again, it's in the outskirts of Fremont. So if we kind of look a little deeper, you can see that besides the fact that Fremont is pretty urbanized, you can definitely see that there is still green areas, but they are quite limited in space. A lot of these bigger areas that you can see are like Christensen Field and the golf club up here, where they have a little more and quite a few trees, because that's just part of that landscaping idea for them. Oh, and here just outside of Fremont we have the Ritz Lake, but again it's outside of Fremont, we don't really have control over that. And then we have Lake Galleria, and again, it's still just right outside of Fremont. So as far as Fremont in general is very urbanized, there are lots of trees, but many of these trees are not native trees to the city of Fremont. And here's Midland. You can see that Midland does actually have a pretty green area around them. So they have done a lot to keep their campus very green, though they do not always provide native plants. For example, tulips are not a native plant to Nebraska, therefore, but it is one of the plants they plant often around campus. So now we're going to deep dive into what Fremont can do. Alright, so one of the things that Fremont can do to help start diversifying and helping the overall wildlife here in Nebraska and here in Fremont specifically is to implement the use of rooftop gardens and vertical gardens. With vertical gardens, it is really important. They are really easy to implement in every single place. They are really low maintenance, and they are easily able to be done with native plants that grow here in Nebraska. For example, planting plants like the wild grapevine would be very beneficial to the animals around us. Not only is it a vigorous climber, so it climbs up very easily up to all sorts of buildings, it can extend up to 40 feet, so reaching the tallest of the buildings that we have. It also yields edible grapes, and it is also very dense in foliage. Therefore, it provides food and shelter for animals around us, especially birds, mice, rabbits, different creatures like that. It also helps support pollinators, and with more pollinators available here in Fremont, the more plants will grow, and the more plants that will grow, the more resources that are available to plants and animals, or to animals specifically around us. So, if we were to implement this, let's say if we were to start this now, put this up in an area that does not have very much foliage around it, but like around Walmart, this is a potential idea of what we could be seeing. Lots of vines going up the building and just around the building. These would all, of course, be natural plants that we would be planting. These would be all native plants. And then up here at the top, even if it's just small planter boxes, and we can plant more native plants. So up here, this would also provide more coverage and shelter for plants and animals around us that would need to shelter in tall grasses like birds and bugs. And it would also provide food for these creatures as well. Therefore, there's not as much competition down here on the ground. Therefore, the slightly larger animals that do live here in Fremont do have a fighting chance down here on the ground, while the animals that can get up here have that equal advantage up here as well, so there's not as much competition between the two creatures. Now, if the city of Fremont took all of this up this is a possibility of what it could look like. Very green on the top, lots of trees and plants really everywhere. You can kind of see in this kind of mock-up image, like this one right here. There's lots of green up the side of its building, and a lot of the big public spaces have a lot of green spaces, which really allows for a lot of creatures to be able to have plenty of resources and shelter. And with there being more shelter and more green, there's also more available water. Since there's shade covering the ground, any rain or anything is more easily collected on the ground, allowing for creatures to be able to gain more access to water. In situations like a drought, there will be less likely of a drought because these plants are providing shade and cooling to our part of the earth, which would then prevent most, or at least some, of the water to not evaporate. And not only does this sort of idea have benefit for us, or for creatures around us, but it also benefits us as a human race. Because with more green around us, the lower our CO2 emissions can become. Trees and plants use carbon dioxide to grow. And if we are producing carbon dioxide by using cars and other sort of vehicles, these plants can use that carbon dioxide, which in the photosynthesis process ends up becoming oxygen, which is something that we need in our air. Because plants tend to be more of a carbon sink. Now, let's talk about one way Fremont can realistically start incorporating these ideas of rooftop gardens or even vertical gardens in our very own city right now. So right here is a picture of the top layer of the downtown parking garage. This parking garage has been closed for the better half of a year. There has been no mention of plans on how it is going to be restored or anything of the sort. So one idea I propose for the city of Fremont to use is creating a rooftop garden up here. The city of Fremont has obviously done just fine without a 2-layer parking garage in the downtown area. So, that being said, I believe that the city of Fremont should use that top layer as a rooftop garden. That we should plant native plants like little bluegrass, wild grapes, goldenrods, all these sorts of plants that are native to Nebraska that will be beneficial for our pollinators, our birds, our bugs, anything of the sort. And if we wanted to add a community aspect, this can be really beneficial for small businesses around town. For example, the Autism Center here in Fremont. It can be used as a way to teach people with autism life skills of gardening and taking care of something that is living, that's not a person or an animal. Plants tend to be a little more forgiving than a plant or a person or an animal. So, with this, I conclude our deep dive and talk about what Fremont can do to plan for our future.